Hi, this is Mackenzie McWilliams and Emily Goldner interviewing.
Okay, what's your name?
My name is Jim Taylor.
How old are you?
I'm 68.
When is your birthday?
November the 6th, 1945.
Okay.
Do you have any brothers or sisters?
I have a brother and a sister. My sister is 3 years younger than I am, and my brother's 10 years younger than I am.
Okay, are any other of your family members were in the military or are in the military?
My
No?
father
Okay.
was.
Where were you born?
Baton Rouge?
Okay, where did you grow up? Were you born and raised in Baton Rouge?
I was, yeah.
Okay.
What did your parents do for a living?
My mama was a homemaker. She didn't work outside the home, and my daddy was in the real estate business.
Okay, where did you attend school?
Well, I went to Catholic schools my whole career up through high school. Went to Catholic High in Baton Rouge, and then I went to LSU.
Are you married?
I'm married, yes. I've been married 8 times. No,
Where did you enlist or wait, were you enlisted or drafted for the military?
I was drafted.
How old were you?
I was drafted. I was 22.
Okay, what military branch were you in?
The Army.
Okay.
Why did you choose that branch?
I didn't have any choice. They sent me a letter and said, "Come here."
Okay. Tell me about the camp or training experiences that you have.
Tell me about what now?
Boot camp.
Oh,
or like
boot camp.
training?
Yeah, they put me on a bus and sent me to Fort Pope, and it was a miserable experience. I was there. I forget how long, 3 or 4 months through boot camp, and so it was a lot of physical activity, and it was kind of stressful.
What do you remember about your instructors?
I remember that they were mean. They were called drill sergeants, and their job is to be mean, and they did a good job of it.
Okay. How long were you in the military?
2 years.
What were you ranked?
I ended up being ranked an E5, enlisted 5, level 5, that's what they call it.
What wars did you serve in?
What?
What wars did you serve in?
Oh, Vietnam.
Okay. Where exactly were you stationed?
You mean, well, when I left Fort Polk, I went to Fort Bragg in North Carolina, and from there I went to Vietnam, and I was stationed in a place called Phu Bai.
Okay.
What was it like arriving in Vietnam?
Well, it was a little bit scary. We landed in a place called, I can't remember the name of it, it was right near Saigon. And the plane landed, and there were these guys standing there, our age, and they had on these very faded fatigues. And we got off the plane and we had on brand new shining fatigues, and they cheered us because we were taking their place. They were going home and we were just getting there. So it was a little bit nerve-wracking.
Okay. Did you see combat?
A little bit.
Did you visit any other countries while being deployed? If so, like where were they?
I didn't really visit any. When we went over there, we landed in Japan. Didn't get off of the base, the military base in Japan, and then on the way back, we landed in the Philippines and Guam, and we didn't get off of the military base. So those are the only countries that I went to, but we stayed at the airports.
Okay. How long were you stationed there in Vietnam?
A year.
Okay.
How did the troops in your unit get along with the Vietnamese people?
Pretty well. I mean, there was some animosity and conflict, but all in all, I would say okay.
Okay. What were your specific duties while in there and while in Vietnam?
I was in a communications bunker underground most of the time, and at night I was in a bunker on what they call the perimeter of the compound, where on guard duty, you could say.
Tell us about some of the most memorable experiences that happened while you were there.
One time, the Secretary of Defense, I think his name was Clark Clifford back then, he was making an appearance, which was a big deal, and so they got us all mustered out and shined up and standing at attention in formation for the Secretary of Defense, and part of that was they had some jets fly over as a sort of a salute to him, and I remember that they were flying in formation, and one of them ran into the other one, and they crashed. I remember that. So that was kind of memorable.
Did they die?
I don't know. I don't know if they did or not. I don't know if they parachuted out or not. They didn't explode, so maybe they got out. I'm not sure.
Okay. Okay. Were there many casualties in your unit?
No.
Were you a prisoner of war? Like,
No.
Okay. I got that one.
Did you stay in touch with your family while being deployed?
Yeah. There was a system set up where you could talk. I could call home, and it was relayed from different places around the country, and so I would talk. I would call my wife and I would say, "Hey," and I'd have to say "over," and then somebody would flip a switch somewhere, and then she could talk. And so there were ham operators, I think, around the world that were relaying these calls. So it was a weird telephone call. Every time you finished talking, you'd have to say "over," and then she'd have to say "over." So we kept in touch that way, and by mail.
So you could like mail like letters?
Yeah, there was no computers back then.
Did they like take a long time to get around?
No, I think the Army was pretty good about getting mail home and back. I don't really know how long it took, but mail service was pretty good. They make it a point to do that.
Okay. How was it like traveling around in Vietnam?
We traveled around mostly by helicopter, sometimes by jeep, and sometimes by truck. You had to be careful where you went, so you just didn't go out and drive around.
Did you ever walk anywhere?
Only in some of the larger, like I went to Da Nang a few times, and it's a big town that has a lot of military people there. You could walk around there. You have to be careful though. You have to be armed to walk around. We would go down there and buy drugs.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh my god! Oh my. What did you do after the war? Did you go back to work or school?
I went back to work, and then I found out I had the GI Bill that would pay for school, and so I went back part-time to graduate school, and I got a master's degree. Over a long period of time, I got a master's degree I think 1976, and
What
so I
was it
did.
in?
I got to have an MBA degree, a Master's of Business Administration.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't really want it, but they paid me to go to school, and I wanted the money, so I went.
Okay. Did you make any close friends while in service?
Yeah, I made one or two that I kept in touch with. One of them I'm still in touch with.
How old is he?
He might be a year older than I am. His daddy was a TV star, and he spends his time. He has a big fishing boat that he keeps in Alaska, and he takes veterans out on week-long fishing trips. Disabled veterans on week-long fishing trips out of Alaska. That's what he's doing right now.
Did you ever revisit Vietnam?
Never been back.
Okay. Have you seen any movies or read any books about the war? And do you think they give an accurate representation of what happened?
I've seen a few. Some of them do and some of them don't. The ones with I can't think of that guy's name.
Forrest Gump.
Huh?
Have you ever seen the Forrest Gump
Oh,
movie?
Forrest Gump. Yeah, that was pretty cute. I was thinking of, there were a couple of movies that I saw that were sort of dramatized, I thought, but I can't remember the names of them. But yeah, I've seen a few movies and they were okay.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. When y'all mail me my check or what?
Oh, what was your experience after the war, like coming back to America?
Oh, it was kind of weird. We landed in the middle of the night, and they took us to a kind of a far off gate because during those days, people were treating Vietnam veterans poorly, and so they sort of protected us that way to keep us away from other people. We landed at night, you know, and didn't go through a regular gate. It wasn't like now where they kind of honor veterans. It wasn't like that at all. So that was kind of weird.
Hi, it's Mackenzie McWilliams and Emily Goldner. It's May 14th, 2014, and this is our second interview.
And that is ferocious Pookie Ardwine growling in the background.
Okay. How did the war change you?
How did the war change me? Well, I think it made me realize how stupid war is, and it made me realize that young people are manipulated into participating in a war that didn't make much sense, and they were manipulated by the threat of jail if they told you to go and you didn't go. But everybody that I knew and was around over there realized that the reason for the war was not what was generally talked about by American leaders. It was about something else, and I don't even know what it was. 55,000 young people died, average age 19, and for what? I don't know. I think everybody today realizes it was a mistake. The Secretary of Defense at the time was, Clark Clifford was one of them, but I can't think of the other one who recently, I believe he's dead now, but he recently admitted in a book that it was probably a mistake. So that's the way it changed me. It made me very skeptical of the behaviors of the government.
Okay.
Okay, how did your family and friends feel about you joining the war?
Well, I don't think anybody was very thrilled about it, and everybody was upset, including me. And I think from people of my daddy's generation, my daddy was in the Army himself during World War II. He had a little bit different view of me going than, say, my mother or my siblings had. I think he thought because of his own experience it was a patriotic thing to do, and maybe it was, I don't know. But nobody was really in favor of me going. I don't think any family would be in favor of their child going. But in Louisiana, which was a pretty conservative state, I think most people thought it was probably a good patriotic thing to do, whereas in other parts of the country they were pretty violently against the war. So I would say that they had that on one level they were politically for the war, but on the other level they didn't want me to go. They wanted somebody else's son to go.
Did you worry that our side might not win?
No, I didn't worry about that. Our side didn't win.
Oh yeah, I did. I knew that.
And you know, have you ever heard of the domino theory? You know what that is?
Yeah, if one domino falls, then they all fall.
Yes, and so they would tell the American people that if Vietnam fell to the communists, then the rest of the countries would fall like dominoes, like Laos and Cambodia and Thailand, boom, 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 India. you know, and that it would get closer and closer to the west, which is where the United States is. None of that happened. So I didn't think too much one way or the other whether we were going to win or not. I just wanted to get home.
Okay, what affected the war how on your physical and mental health, or that others you knew?
I knew some people that came back and couldn't really function in society, and tended to isolate themselves and be angry and get involved in alcohol and drugs. And then some people weren't really affected at all. I came back and got involved with alcohol and drugs. I don't know that it was necessarily my war experience that had something to do with that. I think I was probably an alcoholic before I left. But when I got back, I knew more about drugs when I got back, and so I got involved in that. I ended up getting into rehab, and so I've been without alcohol or drugs for 27 years.
Have you visited any memorials or participated in any ceremonies of the war?
Yeah, I went to the Vietnam Memorial in Washington one time, and it's a big gap in the earth that's lined with this black granite marker that has 55,000 names on it. And they chose the person to do it was a person who was of what's the political correct? Asian, an Asian person. I don't know if she was Vietnamese or not, but she was an Asian person to do it, and there was a lot of controversy about it. They thought that it was below. If you're standing and you're looking that way, you really can't see it because it's below ground, and there was a lot. People were complaining about that. They complained so much about it that they built another memorial, which is a statue of three guys depicted walking through probably a jungle, and that was to appease the people that thought that the other one didn't have a high enough profile. And I've also they have a wall, they have a replica of that wall that travels all over the country, probably more than one, and it ended up in Baton Rouge one time. And by that time, I was wearing a bracelet that had the name of a guy who was deceased. He was killed, Sergeant somebody. I don't remember his name. I still have it. And they had a ceremony at LSU for that wall, and I went to the ceremony, and that man's mama was there, and I got to meet her, and his name did not show up on the wall. They have these big books. If you want to find somebody's name on the wall, they have these big books, and you go, you look up the name, and it tells you where on the wall to look. And he wasn't there. And so we went through some process. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I brought it to somebody's attention that his name was not there. And I think he ultimately got put on the wall. So I think his name is now on that wall. So those are the two memorials I've been to, the one in Washington and the one in Baton Rouge. And there's one that comes to Lafayette every now and then. I never have been to that one.
Okay, what did you think about the enemy, or like the Vietnamese?
Well, one of the things I thought about it was that we were in their country killing them. And for what reason, I'm not quite sure. I had the feeling that they were people just like we are, and they probably wanted the same thing, and they were probably manipulated to fight just like we were. I think if the leaders of those countries hadn't been involved, then the people would probably never have gone to war. But I think that they were people, and some of them were easily identifiable because they wore a uniform. They were in the regular North Vietnamese army, and some of them were what they call Viet Cong people, and they didn't wear a uniform, and so you never knew exactly where they were, or who they were. So.
How do you feel about anti-war protests? How did you feel back then about it?
I was in favor of it.
Did you ever join any, go in protest?
Um, Kind of in a sort of a small way. I think there were some small protests at LSU. LSU was so conservative, and there wasn't much in the way of anti-war at LSU early on like that. And so, but I think there were some small ones that maybe I might have taken part in, and I was very much in favor of them. In fact, I was hoping that they would end the war before I had to go, but they didn't. But I do think they had the protests got to be so violent that I do think that it had something to do with finally ending the war.
What were the protests what would they do?
Well, they had on TV just recently. Have you ever heard of Kent State University?
Yeah.
Okay, so there was a protest at Kent State. The student body at Kent State was protesting against the war, and they gathered on some parade ground over there, and the mayor or the governor or somebody called out the National Guard to try and calm everything down. Well, what ended up happening was the National Guard shot and killed 4 students on Kent State campus. And so it was a big deal, and they were just talking about it again. I guess it must be like the 50th anniversary or something of it. And so it got violent to that extent, and they were breaking into draft boards and pouring blood on draft records, and causing a lot of property damage. And when the police and the National Guard would try to break up protests, people would get hurt and sometimes killed. So it got to be pretty violent.
Okay, what were some of the first changes that happened, when the war started? Right when it started?
Say that again?
What were some of the first changes when the war started? What was different in your daily life from when the war started?
You mean before I was over there?
Yeah.
Oh.
Any difference?
No. I mean, the difference was that they instituted a draft. And so anybody who turned 18 had to register for the draft. That was the biggest change. But having a draft card was actually desirable, because if you had a draft, when you tried to get in a bar, that's what they asked you for, was your draft card. So that was the credential that you showed them. It meant you were old enough. So having a draft card was actually something that people wanted. Getting drafted was not. That was one of the biggest changes. It didn't really bother me initially, because as long as you were in school, they wouldn't draft you. As long as you were in college, they wouldn't draft you. And I was in college, and then so I could stay in college and not get drafted. I went to graduate school, and but I dropped down to a part-time student, and when I did that, the university notified the draft board that I was a part-time student, and they drafted me. And it was kind of a stressful time. One of the major developmental stages in a person's life is when they start college and when they end college. And it was true for me. And when I ended college, it was very stressful, because I didn't really, up until that time in my life, I knew what I was going to do. I was going to go to high school, I was going to go to college. I didn't know anything after that. And so I finished, and I didn't know. And so it was pretty anxious for me. It was the first time I ever went to see a counselor at that time. And so I forgot what the question was.
What was it?
How different life was before and after,
Oh, yeah,
right
yeah,
at
yeah.
the beginning of the.
Yeah, so it was very stressful, and then I did end up getting drafted. I got a draft notice, and it was, in one way, it was almost kind of a relief, because it gave me a direction for 2 more years. So then I knew what I was going to be doing for the next 2 years. But then when I got sworn in New Orleans, and I got on the bus, and I got off the bus at Fort Pope, I realized it was a major screw up. It didn't take long, like 5 minutes or less. I got off the bus and my cousin was already there. I think he beat me there for by a week or something. And I looked at him and when I saw his haircut, I knew it was a mistake. They shaved his head.
Yeah.
So.
What was the most humorous experience, like your whole time in the war? Like the funniest memory you have?
One time, I was in a bunker and I was down there with some communication equipment, and I was at a Corps headquarters, which meant there were a lot of real high-ranking people there. There was a 4-star general, and he never came down where we were, and if he did, you know, that was a real nerve-wracking thing. Christmas Eve, I think it was, he had been drinking, and he had on this wild hat, and he came down, and he stood in the doorway of this general, dressed in this outlandish outfit, and everybody stands at attention immediately. And it was like God coming, and he just came to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. So that was kind of nice. And then one time I went to another town with a friend of mine, and he was an officer, and I took off all the insignia on my uniform so nobody could tell what rank I was, and he got me into the Navy Officers Club, and we sat down there and drank for a while, and I ended up being a little bit uncomfortable with it because if they catch you in the Officers Club and you're not an officer, it's a big deal. So I found the enlisted people's club, Navy club, and I went in there and we had a good time.
Hey, what was your opinion on the president at that time?
Not very good. We were in hopes that Lyndon Johnson was going to end the war, and especially when he just said he wasn't going to run anymore, but that didn't happen. And then when Nixon came in, Nixon was, I didn't like Nixon, and not too many people did, although Louisiana is pretty conservative, so I think he carried Louisiana during the election, but I didn't think too much of any of the leaders since Kennedy.
Do you think the medical care changed because of the war? Like from when the war started to when it ended?
Medical care?
Yeah.
Medical care for veterans?
Yeah.
Well, it's changed a whole lot now, but I think it changed not because of Vietnam veterans, but because of the veterans that are coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, and I think the Veterans Administration is trying to make up for the poor way that Vietnam veterans were treated when they got back. So I think a lot of the positive things that are happening with the VA that I'm taking advantage of right now were really came out of the fact that everybody knew that veterans coming out of Vietnam were not treated very well. Were denied medical care in lots of cases when they shouldn't have been.
How did you feel about the hostility towards returning servicemen? Like, I know you told us about it last time, but like, how did you feel about it?
Well, on the one hand, I sympathized with them because they were anti-war, and on the other hand, it was kind of hurtful that your fellow Americans would treat you in such a way. So I kind of had mixed feelings about it. I was for their anti-war behavior, but I thought attacking veterans really wasn't the good way to go about that.
Do you remember the Tet offense?
Yeah, I was there when that happened.
What is that?
It was a big offensive by the North coming down into the South, launching a major Tet. I think Tet is a time of the year, and so it happened at that particular time of the year, and there was a lot of bloodshed, but the offensive was pretty much unsuccessful.
Um,